shot where Kennedy comes and says, we got to go to the moon, and 10 years later we go to the moon, but that's it, we haven't gone to the moon. And 40 years later we still haven't gone to Mars. This isn't going to happen with humanity. It's very likely that all the details that we're fire because of dropping orders and that cheaper output. Which is really collectively does usher in a whole new era of personal genomics. And just two obvious benefits of this would be trying to determine who will benefit or have unacceptable side effects from a given drug. This hopefully will dramatically lower the cost of developing drugs and make them more effective and allow us to improve drugs for patients who are most likely to benefit from them. The other major advance of this is going to be very helpful in identifying disease genes. So now we can essentially, for any given disease, say Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or autism, we can take affected individuals, resequence their genome, and ask what about their DNA as a whole was not affected by this. And when you try to do this, you don't just have to treat diseases, you can actually for any treatment. So for example, one of the projects that people are talking about doing, actually carrying out, is to get people who are extremely old. So people who have survived a good measure of time, say 105 or more. What is in the DNA that is protective from all the effects of aging that seems to affect all of the rest of us so much more dramatically? So what I hope to commit to is that there really has been a revolution in our ability to do genomic sequencing, and that this revolution in turn is going to have an immediate and real impact on human biology and on biological discovery. Thank you. consider what this object would look like from different angles. And so by doing that, we go back and can produce an image of the original cube. So here's an example of this on a real biological specimen. This is the nematode worm C. elegans. It's been used using GFP and GSRED, which Nico talked about in his lecture. It's been labeled with two different neurons have been labeled with GFP and GSRED, fluorescent proteins. And so we look at these slices going through it. You can see the individual neurons here, and you can see the path of the neurons that make these lines through the sample. That was 85 of these slices, and now what we've done is to load those into the computer and then generate views of that sample from all different angles. And now here is showing that three-dimensional rotation, and so you can see now the architecture of these two neurons in the head of this worm. So that's the idea behind optical sectioning, which is to take these slices at different focal planes and then stack them up. University of New Mexico School of Medicine. He trained in internal medicine at Harvard Medical School, Massachusetts General Hospital. Dr. Wilson completed a cardiology fellowship at the University of Washington. He is both served in the U.S. Public Health Service Mission Corps and Indian Health Service, and for many years, Dr. Olmsted was clinical assistant professor of medicine at the University of Washington Medical School of Seattle. He also served as advisor to the King County Medical Medicine Clinic during its inception and consulted to the Office of Alternative Medicine after it was first established at the National Institute of Health. He's an advocate of rigorous scientific research on complementary medical therapies. He has more than 30 years of experience in clinical trials, press degrees, and basic research. In 2005, Dr. Olmsted joined ProThera as its Chief Science Officer. Dr. Olmsted provides scientific support to both technical services and marketing at ProThera. He designs and directs clinical trials with ProThera products, including probiotics. Dr. Olmsted's current interests are in the development of innovative probiotic and prebiotic formulations and use of features to disrupt systematic biobalance. Should you have questions we get asked during the webinars, there's about availability of this presentation and the slide deck. These materials will be available on our website within a week of the webinar. If you're interested in having these resources, please click the Clinicians tab on the home page where you will find access to our webinars, or you can also log in to find the webinars here on CDX. If you do not have an IDDX now, please click on the Getting Started link on our home page. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the controls over to Dr. Olmsted. I'm happy for this invitation to speak about one of my favorite topics, which is probiotics. I do work for ProThera. I'm their Chief Science Officer, and in the interest of full disclosure, we do market the Claire Laboratories hypoallergenic high-potency brand of probiotics, so keep that in mind when you evaluate what I'm saying. So let's talk about the intestinal microbiota. So this is essentially an organ within us, and we'll get into this more. It's composed of over 100 trillion microorganisms. To put this in perspective, the microbiota, the gastrointestinal microbiota, contains 10 times the number of human cells. So although in terms of absolute mass, it's quite small, in terms of numbers, it's quite large relative to us. So we are definitely a composite organism, not an organism. You have the genetic information
And so the average person is going to harbor somewhere around 150 species. These are dominated by two divisions. Two phyla are very large organizational categories of organisms. So, for example, a phylum would be the Chordata. So we're a member of the phylum Chordata, but obviously there's lots of diversity among members of the phylum Chordata, including the various different vertebrates, which is just one family in that. The microbiota is dominated by two divisions. The Firmicutes, these are gram-positive organisms, usually about 64% of the population in bacterial and negative organisms. That's usually about 23% of each in most vertebrates. There's some variability in this. We'll talk about that later. The vast majority of organisms in the intestinal microbiota are anaerobic, strictly anaerobic, fastidious. We can't culture most of them. That number ranges. Conditions they need for optimal growth, and it may well be that they can't be grown in isolation, that they need to be grown along with other organisms that are perhaps supplying them something that they need for growth, optimal growth. So I mentioned that you can conceptualize the microbiota as an organ, and I think that's a really important concept to grasp. So that this collection of microbes within our gut is, in every sense, an organ like the liver or the kidney. It weighs about 1.5 kilograms with all the stuff in there. And the metabolic activity here rivals that of the liver. There's just so much that's going on in this community within our guts, primarily within the colon and this lower. We know that it's successful for immune and GI maturation. We know that that's been well established. Most of this has been established using what are called probiotic animals, basically germ-free animals, and introducing known amounts of bacteria into their guts to see what happens. But the immune system and the gastrointestinal system don't mature normally, and they don't continue to function normally unless there is an intact, diversified, eubiotic microbiota. But we have been discovering that all sorts of other organ systems don't mature and develop normally, and this includes the central nervous system. And so, for example, normal myelinization in the brain doesn't occur unless there's a gut microbiota that takes place. So we don't understand fully the communications that go on to facilitate that. We do know there's a great deal of communication between. whereby a mother can transfer her own microbiota from her gut into her breast milk, and the infant receives this while nursing. And so this is mediated by dendritic cells, so immune cells within the gut, which are actually able, as you can see, these little dendritic cells here in the middle bottom picture with these little tentacles. And so they send these out. They can actually go straight into the lumen of the gut, sample gut microorganisms, sample gut bacteria, bring them back in, not harm them, transfer them to lymphocytes, travel via the lymphatic system, are released in the breast and into milk where the infant consumes them. So this is some data on real-time polymerase chain reaction testing of breast milk, so between nursing mothers, and you can see that on average, there's somewhere between 200 and 1,000 CFU per milliliter of breast milk, and some women have none, and I would suggest that's probably not normal. I would wonder about whether those mothers actually having a dysbiotic microbiota, but you can see this is quite normal for women to pass bifidobacterium on to their infants while nursing. Other organisms are passed on to their infants, including clear-cut probiotic organisms like Lactobacillus staphylococcus. Also, some Streptococcus species are passed through into the breast milk, and Staphylococcus species, Staphylococcus epidermidis, for example. So a number of different organisms are passed on to the infant. That's part of how infants acquire a normal eubiotic microbiota. But we now know, the classical teaching, if you look back just a few years ago, the dogma has been for 150 years that the fetus is sterile unless there's something wrong. The amniotic fluid is sterile, placenta is sterile, and that acquisition of gut microbiota only begins essentially during birth and then following birth. And that's where we get it. But this turns out to be, as so many other things that I learned over my career years ago, that's not be true. And we now know that amniotic fluid is not normally sterile, that you can find small populations of bacteria, and all of these different genera are listed here on the right of the slide. As you look at it, you can find Enterococcus, Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, Klebsiella, Bacteroides, Bifidobacterium. All of these can be found in the amniotic fluid. And then, of course, because the fetus is drinking the amniotic fluid during development, these then inoculate the meconium. We also know that the placenta now harbors its own microbiome that is involved with protecting the fetuses, and if there's something wrong with that, maybe associated with some dysbiosis of the placental microbiota. This is associated with preterm deliveries, especially preterm deliveries before 28 weeks. So the microbiota occurs before birth, starts to occur before birth, but really takes off after birth. So the baby, as it's being born, is covered with the microbiota of the cervix, of the vagina, and of the perineum. And then there's great homology between the organisms you can find, for example, E. coli serotypes in the nasopharynx of an infant after birth. That's going to match up perfectly with E. coli found in other species, for example. A lot of these Streptococcus and Enterobacteriaceae organisms are aerophilic, and they get into the intestines, they're swallowed by the baby, and they grow, and they essentially set up an anaerobic environment that's required for bifidobacteria and Bacteroides and various Clostridium clusters. And so you get an establishment of this predominantly anaerobic flora that occurs within the first week of life. And then if the baby is breastfed, the baby develops a Bifidobacterium predominance microbiota, and that's normal. And babies who are not breastfed don't develop a normal Bifidobacterium predominance microbiota, and that has health consequences for them. And babies that are born by cesarean section don't develop, they have a dysbiotic microbiota because they haven't had that initial exposure. And of course, the worst thing is to be born by C-section and be formula fed and spend a lot of time in the hospital, and those poor infants don't develop anything close to a normal microbiota. But there is this microbiota that develops during infancy and becomes more adult-like after weaning and exposure to solid foods. And you have a predominance of the firmicutes, the gram-positives, which include things like Lactobacillus, Clostridium, Bifidobacterium. Sorry, not Bifidobacterium, but Lactobacillus and Clostridium, and Eubacterium. And then you have the Bacteroides, and these become more predominant as one is older, and you have a decreasing bifidobacterium as one ages. And there are many people that speculate that this decline in bifidobacterium numbers with age attributes to immune dysfunction locally. If all goes well, you come up with a balanced, eubiotic microecosystem that keeps potentially harmful bacteria in check, like Pseudomonas and Proteus and Staph, and has good numbers of potentially helpful bacteria, which of course are modulating your immune function, are aiding in the digestion and absorption of nutrients, stimulating gut motility, synthesizing vitamins, and inhibiting pathogens and potential pathogens. It's a complicated slide. This is a complicated slide, but it really illustrates two things. One is that everybody's microbiota is a little different. So we may have similar organisms, but the balance is going to be different from person to person. So, for example, here's a healthy 28-year-old woman on the upper left, and she's got over 20% bifidobacterialis. So she's got a really healthy bifidobacteria population, and that's a good thing. And then here's this 37-year-old man, and his bifidobacterial population is down around 5%. And so he's got much more in terms of Clostridia and there could be some potential health implications for that. So all we just need to realize that there's a lot going on, and that when we're trying to modulate this, we're doing this with tools that aren't very precise or fine. There's been interest in microbiota enterotypes, so the initial studies published a few years ago in Nature suggested that people could be broken out into those who had Glaucia predominant, or Prevotella predominant, or Bacteroides predominant populations. But this was based on largely Western populations, as you can see, with some Japanese people studied. So it's a question about, are you going to extrapolate this to the whole world? There might be some differences, but some additional larger studies intended to suggest that healthy people do break down into different enterotypes. Probably a lot of this is based on diet, but everybody's not the same, and so the approach to dysbiosis isn't going to necessarily be the same in everybody. Just keep that in mind. The gut microbiota, one of the most important things that it does is to maintain intestinal integrity. And specifically, when we're talking about intestinal integrity, one of the things that encompasses is healthy barrier function. So you don't have a weak gut, you have good gut barrier function. The integrity of the intestinal barrier is maintained intact, so you're only absorbing things that you need to absorb, and other things like toxins or pathogens are not coming into your body. The commensal bacteria helps with this because it stimulates mucus production. Mucus is obviously an important protective barrier. We know, for example, that people with inflammatory bowel disease have less thick mucus than people with healthy guts. The commensal bacteria stimulate the enterocytes and the cells lining the intestines to secrete defensins. These are molecules that, as the name suggests, defend the body against pathogens. They have toxic effects on pathogens. The commensal bacteria produce mycosins or bacteriocins. You'll see it referred to. These are molecules with toxic effects on pathogens, and part of the way that the commensal bacteria keeps pathogens in check keeps them from translating across the mucosal barrier, the gut barrier, into the submucosal areas and regional lymph nodes. And one of the most important things that the commensal bacteria do is modulate immune function, and they do this primarily by increasing activity of regulatory T cells. And here's an illustration of this. People used to talk about how you had naive T cells. These would be the Th0 cells, and then these T cells could differentiate into helper 1 T cells, Th1 T cells, and these were responsible for cell-mediated immunity, or they could differentiate into helper T cell 2s or Th2 T cells, and these were associated with humoral immunity, and overexpression of Th1 cells with tumor necrosis factor and interferon gamma, and interleukin-2 was associated with autoimmune diseases if it was overexpressed. While overexpression of Th2 T cells various interleukins 4, 5, and 10 was associated with allergy. So people used to talk about a TH1 to TH2 ratio, and if you have too much TH1, you need to balance it by increasing TH2. And that turns out to be completely wrong. And the important ratio is between regulatory T cells, the Tregs, and the effector T cells, so all these other T cells. And in addition to TH1 and TH2, there are also other helper T cells. TH17 is associated with cellular immunity, and so is TH22, just as TH9 is associated with asthma. And it turns out these cells are not even terminally differentiated. So a TH2 cell can turn into a TH1 cell, or a T regulatory cell that should normally damp down excessive immune responses can turn into a TH1 or a TH17 cell. What's important is that it are robust populations of T regulatory cells, and that's where the gut microbiota and that's where probiotics play a major role in gut microbiome. We've got 5 different modalities, general big modalities that we can use to modulate the gut biome, and I'm only going to talk about 2 of them, but I want you to know about all of them. One is diet, and this is probably much neglected, and it's something, I could spend another hour or a couple hours on talking about diet, but we shouldn't forget about diet, and it almost strikes me as pointless to take probiotics or take inulin fiber and have a diet of junk food. I mean, it's like, what are you trying to do? So if you don't address the diet, and if you don't clean up the diet, and if you don't encourage the intake of a lot of soluble, for us, undigestible fiber and fresh fruits and vegetables and legumes, then it's going to be hard to really make an impact with other modalities like probiotics and prebiotics. You can also modulate the gut flora with antibiotics, and so, for example, what you'll immediately appreciate, for example, antibiotic therapy, rifaximin of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. What are we doing? We're trying to modulate the gut microbiota. We're trying to decrease populations. There's a whole literature on antibiotics